The XL-TAR Dominion had ruled the stars for over 1,000 cycles. Their war fleets were the stuff of nightmares, their conquests carved into the histories of fallen civilizations. To challenge them was to invite annihilation. The mere sight of their crimson-bannered warships sent entire worlds into surrender. No species had ever resisted them for long. No force had ever stood against them and lived. So when an unidentified vessel appeared at the edge of their territory, the Dominion saw it as little more than a curiosity. It was a single ship, small compared to their dreadnoughts, barely a speck on their sensors. It moved with purpose but showed no sign of aggression. To Admiral Rethak, Supreme Commander of the 17th Fleet, it was an insult. A lone vessel daring to trespass into Dominion space. He smirked. They must be lost. Rethak sat on the bridge of his flagship, Dominance, a battleship that had personally led the subjugation of 7 star systems. The walls gleamed with polished obsidian, its surface engraved with the names of civilizations that had fallen before the Dominion's might. He leaned forward in his command throne, his golden armor catching the dim blue light of the control panels. "Scan the vessel," he ordered. The bridge crew moved with well-trained efficiency. In seconds, the results appeared on the main display. The alien ship was unlike anything they had seen before. It had no visible weapon emplacements, no energy signatures matching standard armaments, no indication of shielding systems. It was a sleek, angular construct, its dark hull absorbing rather than reflecting the light of nearby stars. A ghost in the void. "They're not broadcasting identification codes," one officer reported. "No distress signals, no response to hailing attempts." Rethak chuckled. "So they are not only foolish but arrogant." A lesser commander might have assumed this was a lost scout, some primitive race that had wandered too far. But Rethak was no fool. No ship ventured into Dominion space by accident. Either this was a diplomatic envoy too ignorant to understand the danger, or worse, it was a probe meant to test their defenses. Neither option pleased him. "Deploy the fleet," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Surround the vessel. Let them know who they are dealing with." Within moments, the darkness of space was filled with the hulking forms of Dominion warships. A dozen cruisers moved into formation, their weapons primed and ready. Interceptor wings darted ahead, their sleek forms cutting through the void like predatory birds. The Dominance itself took position at the center of the formation, its massive cannons glowing with barely contained power. Rethak activated the communications channel. His image was transmitted across the vastness of space, projected into the unknown ship's bridge, if it even had one. His voice, sharp and commanding, carried the full weight of the Dominion's authority. "You have entered XL-TAR space," he declared. "You will power down your engines immediately and submit to inspection. Failure to comply will be seen as an act of hostility." Silence. The unidentified ship did not respond. It did not even acknowledge the transmission. No lights flickered on its surface. No movement betrayed any sign of activity. It simply waited. Rethak narrowed his eyes. He had expected fear. He had expected stammered apologies, hurried compliance, or at the very least, some kind of reaction. But there was nothing. A chill ran through the bridge. Something about this silence was different. It was not the silence of ignorance. It was the silence of something watching, something waiting. One of the officers shifted nervously. "Sir, are we certain they received the transmission?" "Of course they did," Rethak snapped. "Every known species uses some form of radio or subspace communication. Even the most primitive empires would have responded by now." Another pause. Then, finally, the alien ship spoke. A single message, a single voice. "This is neutral space. Stand down." The voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It carried no threat, no arrogance, no fear, just a simple statement. Rethak blinked. Then he laughed. It was not the laughter of amusement, but of disbelief. Did they not understand? Did they truly think they could make demands of the Dominion? He gestured toward his weapons officer. "Prepare a warning shot." The officer hesitated. Sir, if they are simply lost. They are not lost. Rythak interrupted, his tone sharp. They are testing us, and they will learn what happens when the Dominion is tested. The command was given. The order was clear. The shot that would shake the stars was fired. And that was the moment everything changed. The plasma lance roared across the void, a concentrated stream of energy capable of melting through the hull of a battleship in seconds. It was meant as a warning shot, fired deliberately off-target, close enough to remind the unknown vessel of its place, but not enough to destroy it. Yet, before the lance could even reach its intended mark, the human ship moved. Not with a slow drift, not with a calculated roll to evade, but with a motion that defied every law of physics that XL-TAR understood. It did not accelerate. It did not turn. One moment it was there, the next it was somewhere else. A sudden, precise shift in space, as if the void itself had rearranged to accommodate its will. The bridge of the Dominance fell silent. Dozens of officers stared at their screens in disbelief. The calculations didn't make sense. No known propulsion system allowed for instantaneous movement. Even the most advanced XL-TAR ships required time to build momentum. What they had just witnessed was impossible. Admiral Rythak frowned. Did they jump to FTL? No, sir, his chief engineer replied, shaking his head. There was no energy spike, no signature of a hyperspace transition, and no gravitational wake. They just moved. Rythak leaned forward in his command chair. This was no lost traveler, no wandering scout. This was something different, something unknown. A new alert flashed on the bridge's main display. The alien vessel had opened a channel. Patch it through, Rythak ordered. The voice that followed was cold and controlled, as if it belonged to something that did not experience fear or uncertainty. This is neutral space. Stand down. No inflection, no emphasis, just a simple statement. For a moment, no one spoke. The crew of the Dominance had faced countless enemies, rebellious warlords, desperate remnants of fallen empires, even civilizations that had dared to resist the Dominion's rule. But never had they heard a voice like this. It was not the voice of an enemy issuing a threat. It was not the voice of a desperate captain pleading for mercy. It was a voice that simply stated a fact, as if the outcome had already been decided. Rythak's mandibles clicked in irritation. They are stalling, he muttered. They want us to hesitate. He turned to his weapons officer. Lock on and prepare to fire again. This time, direct hit. The officer hesitated. Sir, if they have technology this advanced. We do not negotiate from a position of weakness, Rythak interrupted. They will learn that now. A moment passed, then another. The targeting systems locked on, and the order was about to be given. Then every screen on the bridge flickered. Every console, every holographic display, every piece of technology aboard the Dominance glitched simultaneously. Data scrolled in unreadable bursts of static. A deep hum filled the air, not from the ship's engines but from something else, something external. And then, darkness. For precisely 3 seconds, the bridge of the Dominance lost power. The emergency lights flickered to life almost instantly, but by then, the damage had been done. Every officer scrambled to reboot their systems, their hands flying across controls that no longer responded. Panic rippled through the crew. Sir, the communications officer shouted, we've lost control of our weapons. Navigation is offline. Another officer yelled. Engines are unresponsive. Rythak slammed his fist against his armrest. Report. What happened? The chief engineer's voice was shaky. Sir, the human ship did something. Our systems, it's like they were rewritten in an instant. We've been shut down. Rythak's eyes widened. The Dominion's warships were equipped with the most secure, hardened systems in the galaxy. No enemy had ever disabled them so effortlessly. Even the most sophisticated electronic warfare required time to breach their defenses. This had happened instantly. A slow realization crept through the bridge. The human vessel hadn't fired a shot. It hadn't even raised its weapons. And yet, the Dominion's most powerful warship was helpless. The main display flickered back to life. A single message. This was your final warning. No emotion. No urgency. Just a statement of fact. Rithak felt something unfamiliar in his chest. A feeling he had never known before. Doubt. Admiral Rithak's mandibles tightened as the cold, emotionless message faded from the screen. Around him, his officers worked frantically to restore full control of the Dominance, their claws dancing over flickering consoles. The bridge was a cacophony of beeping alarms and hurried status reports, but one truth was clear. They had been disarmed. Not through brute force, not through a relentless assault, but through something far worse. Absolute technological superiority. The unknown ship hadn't fired a single shot, yet the Dominion's greatest warship sat paralyzed. Unacceptable. Status report, Rithak growled, forcing his voice to remain steady. One of his engineers looked up, his pale blue eyes filled with uncertainty. Weapons remain unresponsive, sir. It's as if they were never installed. How is that possible? We don't know. The targeting systems recognize the weapons exist, but the firing mechanisms, they've been rewritten. Rithak's mandibles clicked in frustration. Navigation. Some function has returned, but only at minimal power. We can move, but nothing beyond sublight speeds. The Admiral's fingers curled against the armrest of his command throne. This was a tactical disaster. His fleet had been crippled without a fight. The enemy hadn't overwhelmed them. They had simply turned them off. This wasn't war. This was something else entirely. A deep unease settled in his gut, but Rithak shoved it aside. The Dominion did not retreat. The Dominion did not surrender. He refused to believe his fleet could be humbled so easily. Reboot all systems, he ordered. Purge every line of code and restore manual control. The bridge officers scrambled to comply. If their systems had been compromised, they would reset them. The Dominion's warships were designed with multiple redundancies, countless layers of defense against digital warfare. No virus, no hacking attempt, no form of cyber attack had ever taken them down for long. Rithak turned his attention back to the unknown vessel. It remained motionless in the void, as if it had never moved at all. He had no doubt that it was watching, observing his every decision. Fine. Let them watch. He would show them what it meant to defy the Xeltar Dominion. A soft chime sounded across the bridge. Sir, the weapons officer breathed. Systems are back online. Rithak smiled, a slow, predatory grin. Target the enemy vessel, he ordered. Fire all batteries. A ripple of hesitation passed through the crew. The previous warning shot had been nothing, a mere test. This would be an execution. Sir, his second-in-command began, if they can disable us again. They won't get the chance. The order was given. A moment later, the Dominance unleashed its full arsenal. 12 plasma cannons roared to life, their energy lances streaking through space with the force to reduce a moon to rubble. High-yield missile pods deployed, launching a storm of projectiles capable of tearing through the most advanced shielding systems. Even the Dominion's secondary vessels joined the assault, lighting up the void with relentless, overwhelming firepower. A direct hit was guaranteed. No ship, no matter how advanced, could evade this level of destruction. And yet, once again, the human ship moved. Not with evasive maneuvers, not with desperate thruster burns. It simply wasn't there anymore. Rithak's eyes widened. The tracking systems scrambled, trying to compensate, but there was nothing to lock onto. The plasma lances, the missiles, the coordinated fire of an entire Dominion battle group, all of it soared into empty space. A second later, the human vessel reappeared. Behind them. Impossible, someone whispered. Rithak's blood turned to ice. There had been no energy fluctuation, no hyperspace signature, no known method of propulsion that could explain what he had just witnessed. It hadn't dodged the attack. It had ignored it. And then the human ship fired. Not with the overwhelming barrage the Dominion had attempted. Not with brute force or reckless destruction. Just a single, thin beam of light. It cut through the void with delicate precision, striking one of the Dominion's cruisers along its central axis. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in eerie silence, the cruiser split apart, its two halves drifting away from each other like a sculpture sliced by an invisible blade. The explosion came a heartbeat later. The remains of the vessel detonated in a controlled, almost methodical burst. An execution, not an accident. The bridge of the Dominance was silent. No alarms blared. No officers scrambled to respond. For the first time in his long and decorated career, Admiral Rathak felt something foreign grip his chest. Not anger, not pride. Something he had never thought himself capable of feeling. Doubt. The wreckage of the destroyed cruiser drifted in the void, its remains glowing with the last embers of its annihilation. No secondary explosions rippled through its shattered frame. No desperate distress calls echoed from survivors. The destruction had been absolute. Yet the human ship had not fired again. It simply remained there, unmoving, waiting. Admiral Rathak's claws dug into the armrests of his command throne. The bridge of the Dominance was frozen, his officers locked in stunned silence. A single precise shot had done what no enemy had ever managed, instilled doubt in the heart of the Exceltar Dominion's finest warriors. It was unacceptable. They only fired one shot, Rathak said, his voice a low growl. They could have destroyed more, but they didn't. The implication was clear. The human ship was not fighting to destroy them. It was demonstrating something far worse. Control. A calculated display of dominance. Rathak rose from his seat. I will not be toyed with. His mandibles clicked in anger as he turned to his weapons officer. I want a full barrage from all ships. I want every remaining vessel to concentrate fire on that ship. No formation tactics. No patterns. Overwhelm them. His second-in-command hesitated. Sir, our previous attack was predictable. Rathak snapped. We fired as we would against any other enemy. That ship, whatever it is, reacts faster than we can comprehend. We do not give it time to react. We do not give it a single moment to disappear again. We bury it under sheer firepower. A brief pause. Then, with a reluctant nod, the officer turned back to his console. All ships, prepare to fire. Across the fleet, the Dominion warships responded in unison. Energy readings spiked. Plasma cannons roared to life, their power levels surging to maximum output. Every remaining missile bay locked onto the human vessel, calculating endless trajectories to ensure no avenue of escape. For the first time in Dominion history, their fleet fought with desperation. Rathak's mandibles twitched in grim satisfaction. The enemy had underestimated them. This was still a battle, and the Dominion never lost battles. Fire. The void erupted in light. A wall of destruction surged forward, a relentless, all-consuming storm. Plasma lances, railgun slugs, missile swarms. It was not a battle formation. It was annihilation made manifest. And then, nothing. The human ship moved again. Not through conventional speed. Not through any propulsion the Dominion could track. It was simply no longer where it had been. A collective shudder ran through the fleet as the realization settled in. The human vessel had not evaded their attack. It had rendered it meaningless. A new alert flashed across the Dominance's main display. Alert. Contact lowest. Rathak's breath caught in his throat. What do you mean, contact lost? The censor's officer's voice was tight with panic. Sir, the ship, its signature is gone. It's no longer in our scanning range. Rathak's claws flexed against the armrests. Find it. The crew scrambled. Dozens of hands worked feverishly at their stations, scanning every spectrum, searching for any trace of the vessel. Then the lights flickered. Just for an instant. Not a power failure. Not an attack. A presence. The comms officer paled. "Sir, transmission incoming." Rithak's gut twisted. He already knew who it was. The main screen flickered to life. And there, against the backdrop of the stars, the human ship had returned. Right in front of them. Its dark hull loomed closer than before, no longer a distant anomaly, but an undeniable force. No shields flared to deflect their attacks. No weapons bristled in aggression. Yet it had chosen to reappear in the most vulnerable position possible. A declaration of superiority. A single voice filled the bridge. Calm. Neutral. Absolute. This was your last mistake. Before Rithak could react, the storm truly began. The human vessel didn't fire in retaliation. It didn't deploy fleets of drones or waves of missiles. It did something far worse. Every Dominion warship flickered. Every screen distorted. Every sensor, every targeting system, every fundamental piece of technology died. The Dominants shuddered violently as entire power grids collapsed in an instant. Emergency systems failed before they could even activate. The bridge plunged into darkness, leaving only the red glow of emergency lights to cast long, jagged shadows across the walls. For the first time in his career, Rithak felt what it was like to be powerless. This was not an attack. This was an execution without the need for weapons. The Dominion fleet had lost, and the humans had never even truly fought them. Darkness swallowed the bridge of the Dominants. The emergency lights cast flickering red glows over the stunned faces of Rithak's crew, their hands frozen over dead consoles. The mighty warship, the pride of the XL-TAR Dominion, was silent. No alarms blared. No warnings flashed. Everything had simply stopped. Rithak forced himself to stand. "Report." His voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade. No one answered. His second-in-command hesitated before glancing at a darkened screen. "Sir, all systems are down." Rithak's mandibles twitched in irritation. "I can see that," he growled. "Restart manual control. Reboot power cores." The chief engineer's claws trembled over his inactive console. "We can't. There is nothing to reboot." He turned, his eyes wide with something that made Rithak's stomach twist. "Fear. Sir, it's not just that our systems are offline. They've been erased." Rithak felt a rare chill run through him. Impossible. The Dominion's warships had redundancies upon redundancies. Even in the worst-case scenario, manual overrides ensured that at least some functions remained operational. No enemy had ever completely shut them down. Yet here they were. Communications, Rithak demanded. Dead. Weapons? Non-existent. Rithak's claws curled into fists. "Then we have no choice," he said. "Send a distress signal using emergency transmission relays. The High Command must be informed." "Sir," the comms officer interrupted, his voice hollow. "There is no High Command." Rithak turned sharply. "What?" The officer's mandibles clicked as he struggled to explain. We lost all connection. No hyperspace relays. No subspace links. No Dominion channels." He swallowed. "It's not just us, sir. It's the entire fleet." A cold realization settled over the bridge. The Dominion's battle group, one of the most powerful armadas in the known galaxy, was alone. Cut off. Disarmed. And the enemy had yet to fire a second shot. Then, through the oppressive silence, the voice returned. "You are no longer a threat." The main display, once dead, flickered back to life. The human ship remained motionless in the void, untouched, unshaken. It had rendered the greatest fleet in the Dominion's history into a drifting graveyard, without sustaining a single scratch. "This is not an act of war," the voice continued, its tone as neutral as ever. "This is a message." Rithak's mandibles tightened. "What message?" he demanded. A pause. Then the voice spoke again. "The era of the Dominion is over." A hush fell over the bridge. Rithak's officers glanced at one another, their expressions filled with disbelief. The idea was unthinkable. The Dominion had ruled for centuries. conquering species after species, subjugating all who stood in their path. They were the supreme force in the galaxy. And yet, in a single battle, their power had been rendered meaningless. Rithak forced himself to speak, his voice low and dangerous. "You believe one battle changes the fate of an empire." "This was not a battle," the human voice corrected. "This was a demonstration." Rithak felt his anger rise. "Then what do you intend to do? Wipe us out? Conquer us?" The response came instantly. "No." The simple answer unsettled him more than any threat ever could. "We are not here to rule," the voice continued. "We do not seek to replace you. But the Dominion's time as an oppressor is over. The galaxy will no longer kneel to you." Rithak bared his teeth. "You think you can force us into submission? We already have." Rithak's breath hitched. The confidence, the absolute certainty. Not arrogance, not bluster. Just a fact. The human ship began to turn. Slowly, deliberately. "We leave you alive," the voice said, "because you must carry this message home. Let your leaders know. Humanity is watching." The screen cut to black. The ship was gone. One moment it was there. The next, it had vanished without a trace. The bridge remained silent, the weight of the encounter pressing down on every soul aboard. Rithak stood motionless, his mind racing. The Dominion had not lost a battle today. It had lost something far greater. Fear had been placed into the hearts of its warriors. Doubt had been carved into the foundation of its empire. And for the first time in history, the Tar Dominion was afraid. The remnants of the once mighty Dominion battle group limped through the void, silent and humbled. The ships, once symbols of unstoppable conquest, drifted like wounded animals, their weapons dead, their systems barely functional. Even as emergency power flickered back to life, no one on board spoke of victory. They had been defeated without a fight. Admiral Rithak stood at the command deck of the Dominance, his gaze fixed on the swirling blue of hyperspace as his fleet crawled home. His claws gripped the railing tightly, his mind replaying the encounter over and over. One ship, one human warship had undone the Dominion's most powerful fleet. The implications were staggering. If humanity had more of these vessels, if this was not some anomaly but a mere glimpse of their true capabilities, then the Dominion's rule was already over. And the worst part, the humans had chosen mercy. A low growl rumbled in Rithak's chest. Mercy was an insult. The Dominion did not beg. The Dominion did not retreat. And yet, here they were, running like prey, carrying a message that would shake the Empire to its core. His second-in-command approached hesitantly. "Sir, we are approaching Dominion space. High Command has been notified of our arrival." Rithak exhaled sharply. What have they said? A pause. They demand an explanation. Rithak's mandibles twitched. Of course they did. The Dominion had never suffered a loss like this. How could he explain what had happened? That they had not been beaten by superior firepower, but by something far worse, irrelevance. He turned to his officers. How much data were we able to recover? The lead analyst, a thin, pale-skinned officer, hesitated before responding. "Minimal, sir. The human chip's technology operated on principles we don't understand. We have no energy signatures, no propulsion data, no method of tracking their movements. It's as if they were never there," Rithak finished grimly. The officer nodded. Rithak clenched his jaw. High Command would demand retribution. They would demand that he present a strategy to counter the human threat. But how could one strategize against something they could not fight? "We will proceed as planned," he said, voice firm. "Prepare all fleet officers for immediate debriefing. No details are to be withheld. The High Command must know the truth." His second-in-command hesitated. "Sir, the truth." Rithak turned his gaze to the younger officer. "Yes," he said, voice low. "The truth. That we were outmatched in every way. That the humans chose to let us live. That our empire may no longer be the supreme force in the galaxy. A tense silence settled over the bridge. None of them wanted to admit it, but the truth was undeniable. The Dominion had spent centuries ruling through fear. Now, for the first time, they were the ones who were afraid. And worst of all, the humans knew it. The XL-Tar Dominion's capital world, Varric Prime, was a fortress unlike any other. A planet encased in layered defenses, protected by fleets that never rested, and ruled by the cold, unyielding hand of the High Command. It was here, deep within the towering halls of the War Council chamber, that Admiral Rathak now stood. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow, illuminated only by the glow of holographic displays. The 12 members of the High Command sat in a semicircle above him, their crimson robes draped over their insectoid forms, their many eyes locked onto him with an intensity that made even a decorated warlord feel exposed. Before them, the recorded footage of the battle played in eerie silence. The Dominion fleet firing in perfect unison. The human vessel vanishing. The destruction of a Dominion cruiser with a single, precise shot. The fleet-wide systems failure. The message. The era of the Dominion is over. The footage ended, and the chamber was left in an uneasy silence. Then High Chancellor Vortesh spoke. His voice was slow, deliberate, but filled with barely contained fury. "You bring us this." Rathak forced himself to meet Vortesh's gaze. "Yes, Chancellor." One of the other high commanders, General Kizur, let out a sharp hiss. "We sent you with the finest fleet in the Dominion, the most advanced warships in existence, and you return with nothing but a warning." Rathak's mandibles twitched, but he did not rise to the insult. "I return with the truth. We were outmatched, overwhelmed not by brute force, but by something beyond our understanding. Their technology is beyond ours. Our weapons had no effect. Our systems were rendered useless." Vortash's many fingers tapped against the armrest of his seat. "You expect us to believe that one human warship crippled an entire Dominion battle group. You have seen the footage," Rathak said evenly. "I expect you to believe your own eyes." Another commander, Minister Vasher, leaned forward. "And yet they did not destroy you." Rathak's jaw tightened. "No, they chose not to." A ripple of unease passed through the High Command. The idea of an enemy holding back, of choosing mercy, was utterly foreign to the Dominion's way of thinking. Vortesh's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Do you know what this means, Admiral?" Rathak nodded. "It means they do not fear us." Silence. For centuries, the XL-Tar Dominion had ruled through sheer dominance. Planets surrendered before battles even began, knowing that resistance was futile. Entire civilizations had been erased for daring to defy them. And now, a single human warship had done the unthinkable. It had shown them that the XL-Tar were insignificant. Vortesh's fingers curled into fists. "This cannot be allowed." General Kizar hissed in agreement. "We must retaliate immediately. We must send every fleet, every warship, and erase this threat before it spreads." Minister Vasher scoffed. "And how do you propose we fight an enemy we cannot even target?" She gestured to the dead silence of the battle footage. "They rendered our fleet powerless in an instant. If we send another fleet, it will only suffer the same fate." "Then we must study them," Kizor snarled. "Find weaknesses. There is no such thing as an invincible enemy." Rathak took a slow breath. "Perhaps. But understand this, they let us go." He let the words sink in. That was not a mistake. That was a message. They wanted us to know that they could destroy us. But they chose not to. Vortesh's eyes gleamed. "Then we still have time." Rathak's mandibles twitched. He did not like where this was going. Vortesh leaned forward. "The Dominion has stood unchallenged for centuries. That will not change now. We will adapt. We will learn. And when we are ready, we will strike." A cold feeling settled in Rathak's chest. The High Command was not considering peace. They were considering revenge. The chamber remained deathly silent, save for the soft hum of the holographic displays flickering overhead. High Chancellor Vortesh's words still hung in the air, heavy with unspoken intent. We will adapt. We will learn. And when we are ready, we will strike. Admiral Rithak's claws tightened at his sides. He had seen firsthand what the humans were capable of. He had watched an entire fleet, the finest warships the Dominion had ever built, turned into powerless wrecks without a single casualty on the human side. The Dominion's leaders, however, refused to accept the reality before them. They were rulers of the stars, conquerors of civilizations. Their arrogance was unshaken. But Rithak knew the truth, and he knew what would happen if they ignored it. You speak of striking back, Rithak said carefully, his voice even. But have you considered what that truly means? Vortesh's eyes narrowed. You question our judgment, Admiral. Rithak did not look away. I question whether you understand the nature of the enemy you are eager to provoke. He gestured toward the holographic screen, where the frozen image of the human warship still lingered. This was no accident. They knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted us to see their power, to understand our insignificance. Vasher, the more measured voice among the high command, leaned forward. Then you believe they are warning us? Rithak nodded. Yes, and I fear what will happen if we refuse to listen. General Kizar hissed in irritation. You fear? Have you grown weak, Rithak? Have the humans broken you? Rithak's mandibles twitched in frustration. No, General. They have shown me something you refuse to see. He took a step forward, his gaze sweeping across the high command. The Dominion is not invincible. We never were. We have ruled through fear, but fear only works on those who believe they have something to lose. He let the words settle before delivering the final blow. The humans do not fear us, and that makes them more dangerous than any enemy we have ever faced. A cold silence fell over the chamber. Vortesh's fingers tapped slowly against the armrest of his throne-like seat. Then what would you have us do, Admiral? Rithak took a breath. He knew what they expected him to say. Surrender. Cower. Submit. But that was not his answer. Adapt. His voice was firm. Not for war. Not for conquest. But for survival. He gestured to the recording. The humans could have wiped us from existence. They did not. That means they are willing to coexist. We must recognize that our era of unchecked dominance is over. If we wish to survive, we must learn how to exist in a galaxy where we are not the strongest. Kizar scoffed. And you think the Dominion should simply bow before them? Rithak shook his head. No, I think we should listen before we doom ourselves. He looked at Vortesh. The next time we provoke them, they will not offer another warning. There will be no mercy. There will be no retreat. He exhaled slowly. There will only be extinction. Vortesh studied him for a long moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he leaned back in his seat. You have given us much to consider, Admiral. His voice was unreadable. You are dismissed. Rithak knew better than to argue. He saluted sharply, turned on his heel, and strode out of the chamber. As the great doors sealed behind him, he let out a quiet breath. He had done all he could. Now the fate of the Dominion rested in the hands of those who had never known fear. And for the first time in history, they had every reason to be afraid.